What happens when forests, wildlife, and people all need the same space to survive? In Ghana, the answer isn't simple, but it is possible. Today, we explore how science, smart policies, and strong community partnerships come together to protect nature while honoring culture. Stay with us. Today, we have two wonderful guests. First, Mr. Emmanuel Taye. He is a conservation scientist at the Center for Biodiversity Conservation Research, CBCR. His work focuses on wetland ecology and ornithology, with a particular interest in migratory birds that depend on Ghana's wetland habitats. He holds 2 degrees from the University of Ghana, a BSc in animal biology and conservation science, and an MPhil in biodiversity and conservation science. In this conversation, he brings deep field and research experience on how species are monitored and how wetlands support Ghana's broader biodiversity. Our second guest is James Selormey. He is also a conservation science professional who until recently served as an assistant manager with the Wildlife Division of the Forestry Commission of Ghana. His work placed him at key coastal wetlands across Accra, including the Densu Delta Ramsar sites. James specializes in wetland ecology, ornithology, and the application of GIS tools in conservation. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Natural Resources and Management from KNUST. He contributes practical insight into how research informs day-to-day management, enforcement, and decision-making in protected wetlands. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in for this episode. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad I have two wonderful conservation science professionals here. We'll zoom right into it. James, how do scientists across the world and in Ghana determine which biodiversity needs to be studied and prioritized for conservation interventions?
Yeah. So thank you very much, Andy. There are a number of metrics that are available to us as conservation scientists to be able to identify what is needed or what might be prioritized in terms of research or for conservation interventions. Example is the red list, the IUCN red list, that gives more of like a metric of species that are endangered, that are threatened, that are likely to go extinct. And that informs conservation scientists as to conservation interventions that need to be prioritized for those species or further data research that needs to, support conclusive actions. And so the IUCN already, this is just one of them. There are a lot of other metrics that are available to conservation scientists that they can use.
Great. James, thank you for that. The IUCN Red List, certainly, it's one of the most important tools conservation people can be using to gauge status globally and then locally as well. Yeah. Emmanuel, how do you think scientists are doing this, and how are Ghanaians also doing this?
So, in addition to that, James's submission, in an ideal situation, we'd want to monitor all biodiversity. That should be the ideal thing. But then we are constrained by resources, time, energy. And when I say resources, not just in terms of financing, but even the people who would be on the ground to carry out the work, right? So because of these constraints, we cannot do all of biodiversity, or we haven't gotten to the point where we can do all of biodiversity yet. So we need to set priorities. And the priorities are set based on some observed trends. So one of the main ones would be the IUCN Red List, like James mentioned. But then again, that also has its limitations because, again, we don't have all of the data to feed into the Red List. So locally, scientists who find themselves in specific fields of scientific endeavor can, based on their experience with research and specific areas, personally or as a collective in institutions or research centers, decide which species need priority. For instance, if you take a species like the Eurasian
Kelly.
not the Kelly, the pied avocet, right? The pied avocet is on the verge of becoming locally extinct. It's in the same family with the black-winged stilt, but the black-winged stilt has a decreasing population. Globally, the pied avocet is fine. It has a stable, almost increasing population trend. So locally, there's a problem. So based on this, if it goes to IUCN Red List, it will give you false positive. But locally, there is the need to understand why. Then you look at what others are reporting around the world. Then that's where the question comes in between Ghana and the rest of the world. You go to places like Senegal and they have huge populations of the avocet. Then the question becomes why the shift in range? Is it because of suitable habitat conditions? Is it food availability? Or is it just they prefer to stop in Senegal and not come further to Ghana anymore? So aside from prioritizing what research should be done for biodiversity, we first of all have to understand their biology. And that understanding would lead us to know which species are of concern and which one should be prioritized. So that is a summarized version.
Great. I mean, yes, we have these science tools. We need to look at the issues and their status globally and then locally and see what is influencing these range shifts, population shifts, and then make decisions based off things like that. And certainly, resources are a factor, from funds to expertise to even just the timing. It's also key. When data is limited, how do you make prioritization decisions that balance the ecological importance practically? So you find that there's a certain species or there's a certain type of ecosystem that, from a scientific point of view, seems to be having certain problems, but you don't have all the data you need. How do you take management decisions, or how do you make prioritization happen practically? Yeah. What do you think about that? How's that?
All right, so that is a very difficult question. And I'm sure that's why you're asking it.
Yeah.
So, in the absence of sufficient data, as I mentioned in my earlier submission, the scientists have information that is not published. So, when you look at the scale of information, there are various levels to it. There's anecdotal evidence, which has not yet been published or which doesn't meet the criteria for publication in either reports, synthesis, or peer-reviewed journals. So, assuming, let's take myself for example, I've been working in the Dainsville Delta for, I'd say, a little over a decade. There are some observations I have made which are not published, that are not available to other researchers. So, if there is a need for prioritization, the experience that I have will come in handy. For instance, like example I gave with the pied avocet, if there's going to be any form of conservation intervention around the family the pied avocet finds itself in recovery, I bring my experience, others also bring their experiences, and as a collective of experts, we can decide where we should prioritize. That is, if there's no data or data is limited, then it becomes an expert opinion. If there are no experts, then it becomes tricky. Then, by dint of the luck, we have to investigate, collect the data, and based on that data, make the decision. So, from my point of view, we have two options: either collect the data and make the decisions based on that, or find experts who have information that have not yet been published. So, based on that expert analysis, we make those decisions.
Just to add to that, sometimes it's not all data that is ones and zeros. There's also other data that comes in the form of traditional knowledge. And so basically within areas, like for example, when you have protected areas, there are communities that surround these protected areas, and some of these communities possess traditional knowledge that dates years and years back. There are ways to, of course, record such information and translate them into data. But that alone, that kind of traditional knowledge alone, is able to set the path for us to be able to prioritize decisions that will be ecologically important or balance out practically.
Thank you so much. I mean, so yes, there's always expert opinion. Um, there's also traditional knowledge. Sometimes these pieces of information may not meet thresholds for scientific papers or journals or reports, but they also play a key role in practically deciding what conservation interventions should be carried out, and that's also important. So, yeah, certainly, if you know something, share with the scientists. If you have some papers, endeavor to publish or always have a flag somewhere. I think it's great that now there are very open platforms where scientists are sharing blog posts, which are more relaxed, and some are even having their own podcasts like this one, and TikToks and all of that. So that's also great. Yeah. Okay. So, Emmanuel, can you share an example where research directly influenced management decisions or policy within the Ghana wildlife conservation history? Like, things you've learnt about in your experience and stuff like that.
Okay, so in response to that, I would say that almost all of our protected areas, resource reserves, Ramsar sites, all of those have been the result of research. Because you need the scientific information to inform the decisions that are being made. Almost all our policies regarding conservation in the country, not almost all of them, are based on research. So we can take the question a bit further and ask whether those decisions and policies have led to action, conservation action that have worked. One that comes to mind would be as far back as in the 80s, the Save the Seashore Bird project, which used a lot of public awareness, community engagement along the coast of Ghana to sensitize people against the killing of migratory birds and turtles. To date, if you go to some of these communities, there are people who were part of those projects who remember the things they were told. You'd go to certain areas, and my chief technician, Mr. Alfred Ali, we go to certain areas, and an old man would rush to us, mention his name. Oh, I remember in 1980 something, you were part of the group that came. Mr. Ali doesn't remember him, but they remember Mr. Ali and they remember what they were told. So, in terms of conservation action, that has influenced how they view the natural environment and their posture towards it. We can talk about other ones like the designation of Ramsar sites in Ghana. Right, all of that was based on sound scientific evidence, from limnology to bathymetry to biodiversity assessments to water quality and so on. So, in terms of that, almost all of our protected areas have been a result of such scientific inquiries.
Yeah, I mean, just to add that before Emmanuel comes now, I know, for instance, that KBA designations are heavily influenced by trigger species, and that's heavy research work that has to be done here. So, yeah, Emmanuel.
Yeah, and by KBA, that is key biodiversity areas, just so that the audience is able to relate. And just to add to that, for example, the establishment of our creamers. Earlier, I was sharing with a group of people that establishment of creamers initially did not just begin as a management intervention or devolution of authority of game wardenship in Ghana, just because it was the best thing to do, but it was based off on sound research and data. Let me give a literal explanation to that. So we would have, for example, in our national parks, let me use like the Mole National Park, for example. Mole National Park is very big, but within Mole National Park, we have various species that exist within that park. Every species has its home range. Okay, now some of these species have home ranges that extend beyond the defined boundaries of those parks. Now, research is able to establish that this is a home range of a certain species. The home range probably overlaps into nearby communities, and because they overlap into nearby communities, a manager of a wildlife park understands that this species that lives within the confines of this park has the possibility to go or roam beyond the park. Now that will probably lead to issues of human wildlife conflict, and then in trying to resolve human wildlife conflict, there is establishment of creamers because there are communities that genuinely want to protect this species. Therefore, they will approach management and say, "Oh, we want authority to be able to do what, help you or support the management of these resources." And so that may be how creamers initially began, but now they've become a thing where areas where there are species that are probably not very close to a certain park or boundary of a certain protected area are still established. But again, it's based on the back of research and being able to identify or make observations that these species occur or are present in these various areas.
So, for instance, if you look at the Picathartes, the
Yeah.
conservation around the Picathartes that leads to the establishment of certain policies is based on sound research.
Yeah.
So we know that, okay, in recent time, we know that there have been observations in other areas, but previously they were known to only inhabit certain areas. And because of that endemism, there had to be certain conservation actions to protect the species from extinction. And based on that information, we can make certain decisions, put in place certain policies and actions to conserve the species.
Great. So, in the ideal situation, how should the partnership between researchers, communities, and the government happen so that we are able to turn all this scientific information into real world conservation action that works? How do we do that?
So, like the example that he gave, Replicathetis, that is the white-necked rockfowl. Now, the white-necked rockfowl was a species that was believed to be extinct at a certain point in history. At a time, we were able to, or researchers were able to identify the location of these species through local knowledge or traditional knowledge, because there were community members that were within that area that were able to identify that, okay, this species is still present in this area. How has that translated to partnership? Now, the communities over there understand that this is an endemic bird. It is very important. It is very rare. And therefore, they themselves have taken the initiative to work with government, to partner with government and various institutions, research-based institutions, of course, to protect that species. So when you go to areas like that, you find that the white-necked rockfowl is very protected. Another example is when you go to Boabin Monkey Sanctuary. That is a very good example of partnership between communities, state agencies, research institutions to protect such species.
Interesting. The Picatatis is endemic to four other countries, and with Ghana, that's five. So maybe our listeners should check that out. Ghana Wildlife Society has been doing a lot of work monitoring that particular bird. Yeah. Also, what are some of the big challenges that exist within the space in moving from recommendations to implementation, and how do we overcome them?
Okay, so before I answer this question, I'd like to make another comment on the previous one.
Yeah, sure.
So, in an ideal situation, I would say that government should not be the only one that has the, I'm using the word mandate loosely, that has the mandate to undertake conservation action. Because ideally, government is acting in the stead of the communities, or on behalf of the communities, acting as a bigger entity. And then we have researchers who are key stakeholders who have a stake in conservation, right? So it's actually more of a loop where all the players should come together for a common goal. Now, or if you look at a football team, each player has a role they play. There's a midfielder, there's a goalkeeper, but they play as a team. All the actors over here should work as a team. There's a role for researchers gathering scientific information. The community also contributes with their local ecological knowledge. Together, this would be given to the policymakers who understand how policies work, how they are translated into action. And then those who are on the ground, the actors, can implement these decisions. If there's a break in any of these channels, or should I say disinterest among any of these actors, then we won't have action. We can go all the way to making the policies, but it won't translate into action. Right? So to move from implementation and recommendations to actually putting in the work or making the action, we need to ensure that all the players are involved, all the players have a stake, all the players are interested, and then we can have action.
Yeah. So it's environmental stewardship, conservation. It's a marathon. Everyone is a stakeholder. We need to support each other to make things happen. And I think that's crucial.
I think a sense of ownership and belonging also ensures that recommendations become action.
Uh,
Else, you'd have people who are saboteurs.
Yeah.
The same
Yeah.
people you are fighting for will sabotage you simply because they don't feel a sense of belonging or a sense of ownership.
Or probably they also don't understand
Exactly.
fully the essence of your interventions or why you want to do what you want to do.
yeah, I really get that. I mean, sometimes you'd imagine that a community has a certain species, and we say, "Hey, this is so endemic. Let's protect it. Let's keep this area away from farming, away from illegal mining, away from anything troubling." And the people are worried, that their livelihoods will be affected negatively, and then they would be cutting your wires, or they would not be involved in the meetings and stuff like that. So I really get that bringing people along is crucial. Yeah.
Yeah. So another challenge is funding. Because no matter how much you want to do something, if you don't have the resources to do it, you won't be able to do it. Right? But then that also presents an opportunity. In the absence of strict funding, as in this is $2 million, let's conserve Picathartis. The community can decide that money is not coming from anywhere. We have that sense of ownership, so we are going to do it. There are places where communities will say, "Oh, this place is a sacred grove. Don't go there." And I also want to submit that our forefathers, they may not have had strict scientific training, but a lot of the taboos, a lot of the practices that they had were scientific in nature. For instance, the establishment of sacred groves, the establishment of evil forests, and all of those things, those
Sacred
were
things.
conservation minded. Maybe they had a conservation mind, maybe they did not. But if you look at it on a grander scale, it's all leading towards conservation. Evil forests, we don't go there. All the species, all the biodiversity in there, conserved. Sacred grove, only the fetish priest goes there. The fetish priest is not going there to hunt. Every biodiversity entity in there, full conservation status. Do you get it? We don't go to sea on Tuesdays. On Tuesdays,
Yes.
fallow period for fisheries, right? And then close seasons among some of the coastal communities. And if you look at it critically, the close seasons are periods when the fishes are spawning. How did they know the fishes are spawning? From local ecological knowledge. They know that at this point in time, they don't get big fish because either they've gone into the sea or back into the lagoons to lay their eggs. So let's not fish. Let's wait for the smaller ones to grow and then we can fish. So all of these traditional practices, although they may be associated with certain deities and other things, in my opinion, are conservation minded.
Okay, so yeah, that's on the challenge of funding. Get to use other resources, including the people's drive and love for nature or traditional practices, to also influence or do some conservation action, take some conservation action. Yeah. Emmanuel, you want to add something on this challenge that exists? What towards that affects recommendations, and so we can move to implementation. Like, and how do we overcome that? Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I would say to speak more on the financial aspect. Um, that issue can only be resolved really if issues of conservation are prioritized at the government level. And so if it's not important, they won't commit resources to it. Okay. And so we need to, for if it's like, for example, we have in Ghana where the free SHS policy was a major government priority issue. A lot of resources was put there. Okay. Of course, there are people who may say that it's politically driven, but at the same time, what did that do? It is allowed for a lot of our people, our population, to be educated. That gave opportunity to a lot of people to be able to be literate and go to school and understand basic things. And so that is important, and it should be prioritized. Yeah. And then not just that's not the only resource we need. We need to be able to train more people in the field of biodiversity and conservation. A lot of things happen because there are not too many people who understand what is going on in our environment. How many of our chiefs have biodiversity knowledge? How many of our judges, our lawyers, understand what is going on within the environment? Imagine your chief knows why a certain water body needs to be preserved. He will use every excuse he can to try and make sure he protects it and prevents galamsey from ongoing there. Imagine your lawyer, imagine your judge. The conversations or the debates in court will be different. You see, so training is very important. We need that. That, like the Bible will say, the work is much, but the laborers are few. We need a lot more people to understand what is going on in our environment. Once there are a lot of people who are speaking the same language, it is easier. It's just like the Tower of Babel. God had to split languages. He split, let us speak different languages for us to be able to stop. If not, would have built that Tower of Babel into space. So once people are speaking the same language, a lot of people know what is going on in the environment. We all know the truth. You cannot come and throw dust into someone's eyes. Someone knows what is going on. I'm speaking the same language with you. Together, we are able to make action done. But it's difficult to get someone who doesn't understand what is going on in the environment to speak the same language as you, because sometimes when they don't understand the basics, it's difficult to explain it to them. Why? When they understand it, it's easier to hold their hand and get action done, or get some work done. So aside from the financial aspect, there should be a lot of investment in training. People should understand what is going on in our environment. Our lawyers should know it, the kids should know it, our judges should know it, our lawmakers should know it. Everybody within the fabric of society should understand what is going on in the environment. And it makes it easy for action to take place because everybody understands what is going on.
Thank you so much. What does meaningful community participation look like in species conservation beyond awareness and regular consultation?
All right. So when you ask the question, I want to understand that you are looking at it in terms of actors that are outside of the community.
I mean, both
Community
local
members
people, and
and-
then people on the outside.
Okay,
also.
so from the perspective of actors outside the community, of course, we have already established that the scientific knowledge is collected by a different group of people. We add those of the community members, and then that becomes the core knowledge that would influence decisions and actions. So, as a researcher, you'd want to be present in the community, and you want to be present in the right way in terms of participation. So, for instance, you can't go and preach what you are not practicing. When we go to the field, we have different team members. Some who have conservation background, some who do not. For instance, you go to a community, let's say a wetland, and you want to organize a cleanup. You don't want them to litter the wetland, you don't want them to pollute with plastic waste. But you go with a driver who doesn't have conservation knowledge. He buys porridge and kosi. Right after drinking, he drops it on the floor. You can't go and stand in front of the fisherman and say, when he eats his wachi, he shouldn't drop the rubber in the wetland. That's what I mean by presence and being present the right way. So preach what you are practicing. Sometimes we go to the field and there are areas where the litter is not too much, you can just clear it. As you are clearing, they are looking at you, they can see what you are doing. People do not like their waste to be cleared by other people, right?
Okay.
So you do it once, the next time they'll feel some way about it. When you go and tell them, oh, based on this and that, it's wrong to litter the wetland because then it affects fishes, spawning areas, and all of that, then they are more inclined to listen to you. So that's where the presence and the participation will come in. You have to do what you are preaching and be present in the right way.
Yeah. What about for people within the community? How do you know, engage them or have them participate actively beyond, hey, this is a Pegatatis bed is endemic, don't kill it, or ahead of a certain project, you do consultation, trying to collect data and stuff like that. What else can you do to involve
Do it
people
with them.
in the community?
Yeah, do it with the community. And I think I like the fact that a lot of NGOs that are in the environment space who go to communities to do cleanups and other activities are part of the activity. They don't just provide the materials and allow the community to do it. You see them in their Wellington boots, in the gutters, in field, doing the actual work. So the community is inclined to help you because you are helping them, rather than just going and saying this place is dirty, clean it. When you start, they'll join you. There are cases where you start, people are not minding you. One or two people come around, they see you are going. Before you realize, you have a whole community with you. Some are joking, having fun, whilst doing the work. So I'd say you have to do it with them, especially if you are really passionate about what you are preaching.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to add to that, like you're saying, beyond the awareness creation and the consultation, which usually happens within a project environment. It should move from that project environment to becoming operational. And so, by you doing the work with them and then letting them actually benefit, let them see the physical benefit,
The link.
the links, because people would usually only do something when they are motivated to do so. And so when they are able to see the linkages, okay, my livelihood is better. My earnings, my incomes are better when this species is conserved, when this environment, when this habitat is conserved. You see that there is a natural, motivation to try and literally participate. There's ownership of, species conservation, habitat conservation. A very good example I can give is what is going on in Idirisu Delta with the Desu women, there's a women oyster pickers association, DOPA. So basically, what they are doing is they are into mangrove conservation. White mangroves, particularly the red mangroves, and it's because they've identified that when mangrove conservation or mangroves are conserved and are restored or are thriving, it literally translates to the oysters that they are able to pick. So when the more mangroves they have, the better their oyster harvest. So when there's that linkage between species conservation, habitat conservation, and livelihoods, employment, there's a natural, compliance or natural motivation to see to it that these species are preserved. And that's what a typical community participation should look like.
Yeah. So in addition to that, you can also draw the linkage to their survival.
Yeah.
For instance, it has been projected that along the Dinsu portion of the Ghana coast, if there is a strong storm at sea, all of those portions are likely to be underwater.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So if you want to, and again, this may not be beyond awareness, because if you have the information, you need to make sure that the community is aware of it through education. Yes. So linking that to their survival, especially in a language that they understand, not just the physical language, but saying it in a way that they can relate with, would lead to that participation that we are looking at.
I think
Like with communities that are struggling with coastal erosion
Yeah.
and things like that, shoreline, erosion and things like that. When you come up with nature-based solutions that they can literally link these solutions to the survival
Yeah.
of that, the survival of that ecosystem, and which translates to their own survival as a people or as a group. They are motivated to make sure that certain things are done or certain things are maintained, or that area is conserved or habitat is conserved. So
For instance, if you go to places like the Azizania area, then you won't find people sun winning,
along
because
the
they
coast.
realize that
Yes.
any activity like sun winning
affects the coast.
affects them directly.
Sand winning on the coast directly affects us.
On the other side, if you go to Isiama, people are actively sun winning throughout the day. They come with their aboboya, fill it up, go. Come back, fill it up, go. Meanwhile, you can see the clear evidence of coastal erosion. Coconut trees have had the sun around their roots removed and they've fallen. But because that linkage to their survival hasn't been established yet, the activity continues until people's houses are in the sea. Then they realize that, okay, we should not carry the sand from this place, because that's what is saving us. Eventually, it's going to happen if things are not changed.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly crucial. I mean, within conservation, that community members are actively involved and are made to own conservation interventions. I suppose that could be one of the reasons why a fence and fines approach to certain conservation initiatives wouldn't work, and people have moved away from that to more participatory approaches like Kramers and stuff like that, because people need to be involved, people need to understand, people need to have ownership. And I think that feeds into the next question, which is our last one for today. How do you balance conservation needs with local livelihood issues, especially for communities that depend on natural resources? James, you want to start?
Sustainability. We no Nobody is saying that you cannot depend on natural resources within such ecosystems or areas, but it should be done sustainably. And again, this is where research feeds into us knowing how much is too much. We need to understand how much is too much. What how far can we go before we break the limit? And in that, yes, basically. So first we need to look at sustainability. We need to be very sustainable when it comes to our livelihoods. We should also look at alternative livelihoods, explore other areas. We cannot just maintain doing the same thing,
Expect the same results.
expecting the same results. So we can explore other areas. An example, a typical example that I like to give is Sakuma Ramsar site. It's my Sakuma Ramsar site. It's unfortunate, but when you go to Sakuma, there used to be traditional regimes where they had days where they don't fish.
Off days.
Off days, exactly. That's Fridays. When you go there now on Fridays, that's where the fishing is done the heaviest. But if the communities are probably introduced to other forms of livelihoods, like looking at all the taifa that has taken over, the lagoon area, looking at what economic benefits they can get from that, the water hyacinth that is there, what economic benefit can they get from that? That would be a way of introducing another form of livelihood for them, and that would also feed into, again, the restoration of that habitat. You see, so sustainability is key. Looking at other alternative livelihoods as well is also important.
Yeah.
Well, James has already mentioned the points I wanted to mention, but I would want to just start off by saying that we need to establish why the need for conservation. And if you do conservation 101, one of the first things you have thought is that conservation is not done in a vacuum. We are conserving because we like what is there and we want to continue having it. That's the whole idea behind conservation. Although there are other, metrics for conservation, like some species having intrinsic value, right? Conservation for intrinsic value of biodiversity. But the overarching aim is that people benefit from nature, from the environment, from biodiversity, and we want to continue reaping those benefits without it getting finished. Else, we will also be finished. So having this understanding, how do we ensure that the resources that we have at our disposal continue to be there for us? And like James rightly said, alternative livelihoods. So if fishing is what you are dependent on, what else can you do apart from the fishing so that you can still have your livelihood and occasionally you fish? So that when we have periods like close seasons, you are not completely destitute.
Yeah.
Else, if people do not have alternatives, they would forego all the repercussions and consequences and still carry out the activity because they want to survive. If you don't have food to eat, who cares about going to jail?
Exactly.
You first feed yourself, survive, and then you can deal with whether you go to jail or you get a lawyer to take you out of it, right? Alternatively, for instance, in places like Adan, around the Togloku, Toku Lagoon area, the communities have established woodlots with the help of the Wildlife Division of the Forestry Commission. So whereas they would naturally go and harvest the mangroves, they rather help to propagate the mangroves. Then they establish woodlots adjacent the mangrove stands, which they harvest occasionally for their firewood needs, for construction needs, and others. So by so doing, they plant timber varieties that are fast growing and they can harvest sustainably and leave the mangroves that are performing these ecological services to them, right? Then again, if you look at fisheries, turtle harvesting, all of those things, some of these things are not necessarily livelihood based. They are more of delicacy requirements, like bushmeat. People have a taste for bushmeat. Not that they have only bushmeat. There's fish, there's chicken, there's poultry, other things, but people have a taste for bushmeat.
Special taste.
A special taste for bushmeat. Either it's cultural or it's just a personal preference. But if we consume all of the bushmeat, then your delicacy is finished. So having that understanding, occasionally get off the bushmeat, try something else. That's where the alternatives come in again. so that we can continue to have the bushmeat if it's once a year or so on, for instance, right? And one thing I particularly like is that when you look at the protected areas concept, there are resource reserves where we are not saying that these animals or these biodiversity components don't touch them, but allow them to get to a point where they can be culled.
Yeah.
Then you can harvest. So that is more of a practical way of looking at this. So to blend livelihoods, community needs, and the need for food with conservation, we first have to understand why we are doing the conservation.
Yeah. It's good that we always understand that nature takes care of us as we take care of nature.
Exactly.
So we need to conserve, use our resources sustainably, because it's not just for us today, it's for future generations, and we shouldn't impact their chances of enjoying these benefits. There are, of course, extremes. So certain times people would look at a certain green area and then they say, hey, why should this place be green? Let's clear it all, have a concrete jungle, and then build something. And there are benefits in there for biodiversity, which we lose. And then you'd have people saying, hey, let's destroy this farmland or this forest area and then give it out for illegal mining because I'll make more gains than if I was farming using modern agroforestry techniques or other additional.
So that
approaches.
example kind of fits into the personal preference.
Yeah.
So it's not now about livelihood.
Something extra.
It's about extra, right? Other conservationists will use other words to describe that activity, which I don't want to use, but it's just extra. This is not about survival. It's just about the person wanting to experience certain luxuries in life, and that is why they are doing that. It's not about living today so you can see tomorrow.
Yeah.
There are cases where it's actually about I want to see tomorrow. You get it? Like
Basic.
No money to buy food, and the turtle washes up at the shore.
There are those cases. Yes.
Yeah, there are cases like that, and then there are cases like you mentioned where I have a cocoa farm. Every year I harvest. Government buys my cocoa, gives me money, but I want more.
Yeah, someone wants to triple it.
Exactly. Right. So it's not just about the livelihood again.
I think at this point we'll just take closing reflections on today's episode and the topic at large, and each speaker will just put out a general message or thoughts they think should be looked at by the listener. Yeah. So let's start with James.
Yeah. So looking at the conversation we just had from the beginning, looking at how species are studied and prioritized, there are a lot of tools out there that we can utilize. Unfortunately, we have a lot of institutions that have become more administrative than trying to solve problems. They are rather managing the problems instead of trying to solve them. And so there are a lot of tools available to us that we can use to prioritize what species need to be studied and those that need to be prioritized for conservation. At that point, it shouldn't only just be the fact that yes, now we've established information as to where we are supposed to go. We should now move from there into taking action, making sure that the research findings that we develop lead to informed decisions, and then from decisions we take action. And we do a lot of talk here. We do a lot of decision making. Oh, this year we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Typical example is our wetlands, National Wetlands Conservation Strategy and Action Plan. That has been sitting somewhere for how many years, only God knows. And till now, not much has been done about it. So those were decisions that were taken and put properly, put together in a strategic document with action plans and everything. But whether action had taken place on ground is a different issue. And when we are taking the action, we should make sure that we are involved in communities, respecting their knowledge, taking, or respecting the rights that they have to these resources, and involve them in the process to make sure that these actions or conservation actions that we want to take are equitable, are sustainable. They take the principles of sustainability and at the same time respect the equity, the rights of the local stakeholders as well. And so I think that would be my conclusion.
Yeah, Emmanuel.
Yeah, so I would conclude by reiterating one of my earlier submissions, which you so succinctly put that if we take care of nature, nature will take care of us. The whole idea behind conservation is so that what is there can continue to be there, and it's for our own benefit. So collectively, there are actions we need to take. Individually, there are actions we need to take, and it all comes down to having a good understanding of our role or what roles that we play. Right. As a researcher, it is very tempting to just do the research, get it over with, write your nice report, and then your work is done. But
And make your
and
recommendations.
make your recommendations, yes. But we need to move beyond that and get active when it comes to implementation and actions. More so because you wrote the recommendations, you understand exactly what you think has to be done. So, being at the forefront of action, you can get to ensure that the right actions are taken and that we do not miss when it comes to hitting the mark.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I think that we've tried our best to talk about how science, policy, community partnerships work to protect wildlife beyond, flagship species, focused on ecosystems and general issues, while balancing ecological and human needs. I hope everyone listening learned a few things from today's episode, and you'd be joining us for the next one as well. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Conservation works best when we work together, from research to policy to community action. Every step counts towards a future where nature and culture thrive side by side. Thanks for listening to the Ghana Wildlife Society Nature Podcast. Stay curious, stay connected, and keep protecting what matters.